Hey, hopefully you can hear that in the background. A little jazz going here, going in the 20s. Hey, obviously I'm Mayo. Um, Sadly, even though I promised you guys I'd be back on Monday, it has been suggested to me that I take additional time off yet this week. Um, Turns out that COVID thing didn't go so well. I mean, I feel relatively okay, but I can't have myself infecting other people. So I am remote at a secret location coming to you. This is a recorded Zoom session. Our goal in having you watch and listen to this is to allow me to cover some information with you, and then we're going to do a little online discussion, allow me to interact with you live this block, so that you're not left entirely on your own, because that thought haunts me. So here we go. We're going to see if we can find my PowerPoint here on Prohibition. Last week we talked about the Red Scare, that transition from World War I into the 1920s. All right, so look, a lot going on in the decade of the 1920s. It's a great decade economically for the United States. It's a great decade culturally for the United States. It's a great decade in a lot of ways for the United States, and it's fun to study and talk about. There's also some downside to it. In the 1920s, we're a really, really racist country too, and so that's a theme that's going to keep coming up here. I don't know why I'm like turning to the side and staring at the microphone. So anyhow, Prohibition. If you're in the third block class, you guys had a reading about this over the weekend about Prohibition. If you're in the fourth block class, you did not, so congratulations to you. Other than that, same content, same video. Here we go. Prohibition means the outlawing of alcohol. The 18th Amendment of the Constitution made it illegal to buy, sell, manufacture, or transport alcohol in the United States. That means no wine, no beer, no liquor. It required a constitutional amendment to do that. And the amendment of the Constitution that created Prohibition was the 18th Amendment, something you got to know. So the 18th Amendment is Prohibition. And so I guess I want you to think for just a second here, who are some of the people or groups of people that might think this is a good idea? Who are some of the people or groups of people that would have wanted Prohibition? While you're thinking about that, here's a reminder again that the 18th Amendment to the Constitution gave us Prohibition, and the 18th Amendment is Prohibition, and the Prohibition is the 18th Amendment. All right, so why Prohibition? Who wanted it? Go ahead, think of it, think of it, think of it. Okay, some of you thought women would support Prohibition. It's a sad fact of life that in the early part of the century, in a factory system, a lot of men that worked in factories and industries, they got paid on Friday, they go out drinking with their buddies, they come home drunk, and they beat their wife and kids. If you're a woman, you're thinking, hey, John's a great husband when he's sober. If alcohol is illegal, he'll be sober all the time. And here we see a group of women, very serious women, very beautiful women. Okay, that might have been sarcasm. With a sign that says, lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. Lips that touch wine will never touch mine. What else did you think in the silent recesses of your mind? Yes, religious people. There are a lot of religious people who say, you know what? A lot of times people sin more when they're drunk. And so, maybe people would act more moral, more ethical if there was no alcohol. And lastly, and I did tap into the thoughts of a few of you here, you thought, hey, business owners, I'll bet a lot of guys are accidents on the job because they're hungover or because they're drunk. And so these groups of people said, you know what, let's give this a try and see if we can become a better society through not having any alcohol. Well, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this was an absolute failure. Prohibition was virtually ignored in large cities on the East Coast. A report in 1924 showed that, while people like farming communities in Kansas, little, quiet church-going people obeyed the law 95% of the time. In New York City, people just virtually ignored it. Matter of fact, in New York City, I'm not altogether sure that more people didn't drink than before Prohibition. And one of the reasons is places like Boston, New York, on the East Coast got a large immigrant population. A lot of those immigrant cultures are tied to alcohol, especially the Irish. It's not a stereotype. It's a fact. But same with Germans and Italians. And so, from the very beginning, there wasn't enough money to enforce Prohibition. There wasn't enough manpower to enforce Prohibition, and people just simply wanted to drink. Quite frankly, I'm not even really sure how this got ratified because it was unpopular immediately. Now, the problem with a law like Prohibition is if it's unpopular and people just decide, it's a silly law, I'm just going to go ahead and drink anyhow. they began to question other laws. And so it's created widespread disregard for the law. Prohibition, a lot of people thought was somewhat racist. Prohibition was supported by groups like the Ku Klux Klan because this will screw those immigrants that like to drink. Because in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan is a very powerful and influential group. And they don't just hate blacks anymore. They also hate Jews and Catholics and immigrants. And so this is a way of kind of attacking immigrant cultures or the Catholic Church, because in the Catholic Mass, they actually use wine. And so one of the reasons Prohibition failed is people that initially supported it thought, oh my gosh, I'm on the same side of an issue as the Ku Klux Klan. I want to be on the same side of anything as this group of racists. And so, support for Prohibition began to erode pretty quickly. Now, when you're somewhere where there is Prohibition, okay, the United States went dry in 1920. When there's Prohibition, that means it's dry. There's nothing to drink, alcohol-wise. So if you want to get rid of Prohibition, if you want to go back to having alcohol, that makes you a wet. I know, of all the political terms like know-nothings and copperheads and anything else you learned in the past, wets is about the dumbest name to be labeled, but it's the case. And they're going to work really hard for the repeal of the 18th Amendment. To repeal an amendment means to take it away, to undo it. It's only been done once, and it's going to be with Prohibition. Prohibition will be the law of the land from 1920 until December 5th, 1933, when the 18th Amendment is repealed. And that in itself took a constitutional amendment. So the 21st Amendment then repeals Prohibition. It's easy if you're thinking, man, how am I going to keep those two straight? It's easy enough to remember. 18th Amendment is Prohibition. You cannot drink at 18. The 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition. You can drink at 21. So maybe that helps. There were people during Prohibition that made illegal alcohol, that transported it, that sold it. Okay, these people are called bootleggers. Now, originally, a bootlegger was somebody who literally hid liquor in the leg of their boot. Look at the bottom right here, you see something called a flask. I'm sure many of you have seen this. It's kind of flat and it's curved. If you ever wondered why it was curved, it's curved to go along with the curve of your leg when you slide it down in your boot to hide your illegal alcohol. So a flask was something a bootlegger would carry. Eventually, it meant anybody that made or transported or sold or marketed illegal alcohol. Excuse me. Of course, now, you guys have bootleg DVDs or bootleg Oakley sunglasses or whatever, anything that's, illegally copied or made. And of course, all this bootlegging, all this illegal sale of alcohol ratcheted up crime. And so you're going to have organized crime. Here's a picture of Al Capone, number one gangster of the era. Al Capone, by the way, in the year 1927, made $60 million just off selling illegal alcohol. He made $105 million total that year, but $60 million of it was from running booze. So it's a big business, just like selling drugs is today. Even though drugs are illegal, they're still around, and a lot of people that sell them make a lot of money. I'm not advocating it as a career choice. Do not do it. Secret clubs where they sold alcohol were called speakeasies, illegal bars that flourished in cities. It's estimated in New York City there were 3 speakeasies per block. And you go, Mr. Mayor, that's ridiculous. If there were 3 speakeasies per block, the cops would have found them. They did. And so a cop would walk into a speakeasy and say, speakeasy, okay, you're under arrest, especially you there, bartender, you're under arrest. And the bartender would say, or I give you $100 a week plus free beer, and you pretend you never saw the place. Well, if I'm a cop, I only make about $5,000 a year. So if somebody's going to pay me $100 a week to pretend their speakeasy doesn't exist, I just doubled my salary. So sure, I'm biting. And then I'm leaving. I'm looking for the next speakeasy I can find, try to get the same deal going with that guy. And so the cops were in on the whole thing. And again, it created a lot of corruption. So there seems to be nothing positive about Prohibition. People disregarded other laws because of it. People drank anyway. It created organized crime to an extent never seen before in this country. It corrupted cops and other government officials who took bribes. It just is something that is a massive failure. But Prohibition is the cultural backdrop for everything else in the 1920s. Another thing that had a big impact was women's suffrage. The word suffrage means right to vote. Women got the right to vote when the 19th Amendment was ratified, went into effect in 1920. The first presidential election where women could vote was 1920, the Warren Harding election. We'll talk more about him later in the week. Um, so women's suffrage. Now, look, that gave women the right to vote, but a lot of women, even though they now have the right to vote, didn't. A lot of women, now they had the right to vote, simply voted just like their husbands. So it didn't make a big difference politically. What it did do was it changed our society. Once women had the right to vote, they basically said, hey, now we're equal to men. Now we have all the same political rights as men. We can get jobs and work outside the home. We can wait longer to get married. We can go to college, get an education. We can go out with our friends, have a girls' night. We have more freedom now. We're equal members of society. And so it changes. You're going to have a reading coming up here imminently about the changing culture. And from the fourth block class, you already perhaps started that on Friday with that textbook excerpt. And if you're in the third block class, you're going to have an assigned reading tomorrow that covers that. But a lot of it expresses the fact that women said, hey, I can smoke, I can drink, I can wear makeup, I can wear shorter dresses, because I have the right to vote now, I have the right to dress how I want, to talk how I want, to act how I want, to hang out with who I want. And so, more women worked, more remained single, more expressed themselves. All this comes from that right to vote. Some of the women that showed this independence were called flappers. They got their hair cut short. It's called a bob cut. They wore shorter dresses, a cloche hat or a headband. They wore makeup. They smoked. They drank. They danced. Now listen, flappers are not immoral. Flapper doesn't mean you went out sleeping around or being, loose or anything. It just meant you went out and hung out with your friends and had a good time. Okay? It doesn't mean you did anything morally wrong. So don't think flappers are whatever other word you want to put in there for people that might do that. Flappers wore their skirts shorter so they could show their legs and ankles, but also so they could dance. It's hard to dance in a really long dress. And there are a lot of very popular dances like the Charleston and some other ones that go along with the new style of music called jazz. We'll look at some videos of stuff later in the week about that. Here's a picture of some flappers. Those are, if you look at the picture here in the middle, these dresses are shorter than the dresses we talked about back during World War One. And so, this change politically, giving women the right to vote, changed women culturally. So look, that's some information we would have gone over in class. It would have taken longer because we'd had, question, answer, and give and take. And I really do apologize. I'm kind of being held at home against my will. I want to be there live. This is the crappiest start to a school year ever. But we're going to make the best of it. Do not worry. Okay. I will move stuff around. I'll push stuff back. We'll get it together. Just be patient. Other stuff, we're going to stay on task with things. In a minute here when I'm done, I want you to go to the discussion. I'll interact with you live a little bit, talking about some more of this stuff a little bit more, but I want to give you a sight and sound type of chunk here. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Do a video again on Wednesday for sure. Maybe one between now and then. We'll see how it goes. All right. Hey, be great for the sub. Just continue to be awesome. See you soon, hopefully.